Welcome to the Odds Checker Premier League preview. I am your host, George Ellick, and I'm joined by two guys who know everything there is to know ahead of this Premier League season. Firstly, Adam Newson from Football Whispers. Good to have you here, Adam.
Thank you for having me.
And Tottenham fans, don't get too excited. This isn't the Dan Levy that you've tuned in to hope to see, but it's Dan Levy from Smarket. It's good to see you, Dan.
It's the other one they were.
The other one.
An Arsenal fan, no less.
Or as you said off, I'm going to embarrass him. You said Dan Romani, I think, which I think is a joke. I think you've maybe told one too many times now, but
one or two. You still laughed.
I did laugh, and I'm laughing now. Firstly, before we get into the nitty gritty, I'll give you guys both a chance while you're here to maybe promote your employers a bit. So, Adam, coming to you first, just tell us a bit about Football Whispers, what people can expect from you guys, and why they should take an interest in what you're doing.
So, what we do is we basically try and make stats in football, which can become very, very complicated depending on what level you go to. We go to quite a deep level, and the aim is to try and make all that data that clubs use and that sort of Opta use. We take all that data and we try and make it easy to understand for the casual football fan in quite a digestible way. And hopefully today I'll be sort of throwing out a few stats for you guys that will help people who are betting as well as just the casual football fan who wants to know that little bit more about their club. I
get very frustrated when people seem to hear the word stats and turn off straight away, because I think maybe people sometimes don't understand exactly what they mean. They hear XG and they panic, whereas actually maybe without realising you talk about it the whole time.
I would say I was probably one of those people who would not dismiss stats entirely, but think people could get bogged down in them a little bit too much. But I do think, having worked for Football Whispers now for a year and a half, that there's a good place for it in the football discussion. And the more you sort of learn about it, the more you can see trends and certain things that you can then see on the pitch as well.
Which is especially important for betting and finding value, something, Dan, you know all about. Tell us a bit about Smarkets. I know there's maybe an offer or two that you can tell listeners and watchers.
Yeah, so Smarkets is a betting exchange. We've been around for about 10 years. The company really took off around the last World Cup in 2014, or the one before, I should say now. So we have a flat 2% commission across all our sports. Football and horse racing really our biggest sports. I think really worth checking our exchange out because we have a brand new app which looks absolutely beautiful, fantastic user interface and great design as well. So a betting exchange that people can check out. And as I said, or you said, we have a Premier League choose your team offer. So I just wanted to give that little plug. It's going to be coming out. I think it's live now. I think it's going to be on Odds Checker, in fact, on Thursday, transfer deadline day. Basically, it's £50, so it's more like 5 by 10. So it's £10 in refunded losses on your team's next 5 Premier League games. So what happens is you sign up, you choose a team, any team you like, and then we refund losses up to £10 on each of the next 5 Premier League games. So pretty simple. You could deposit 10 quid, you bet. If you lose that bet, you've still got 10 quid in your account as withdrawable cash. And just to be clear as well, it's not credit, it's not a free bet, it is refunding your losses, your cash is back in your account for the next or the first 5 Premier League games for your team after you sign up.
Sounds like an absolute no-brainer to me for anyone who doesn't have a Smarkets account or doesn't really know much about it or know much about exchange betting. If you go on to the Smarkets site or on Thursday, go on the Odds Checker site, you should see it there. And you'll see Smarkets' prices all on the Odds Checker grids as well. As ever, I can only implore you to make sure you check our grids to make sure you're getting the best price for your bet, make sure you're winning the most, and you can also place your bets through our site as well. So that's all the plugging we have to do now. We can get into the nitty gritty.
I'll be plugging throughout, trust me.
I'm sure, so will I. It's just a battle. And we're going to start at the top and look at the Premier League winner market. Going through the top 6 in the betting, the only 6 that people I think really are expecting to cause much trouble here. Manchester City are the 7-10 favourites, odds-on favourites, unsurprisingly after last season. Liverpool 4-1, and then Manchester United 12-1, Chelsea 20-1, Tottenham 20-1, Arsenal 25-1, 300-1 bar. These are obviously the best prices on offer on Odds Checker. Manchester City 1.7 with Smarkets, the favourites, but 5.2 they are on Liverpool, which is a touch bigger than any of the fixed odds sites on our site. So, Man City odds on favourites. Adam, coming to you first. Is that fair enough? Is this going to be a procession, or are there teams out there who can trouble them?
I think it's completely fair, and whilst I don't think they'll probably win the title by 19 points this year, I can't see anyone beating them, to be honest. I think maybe Pep Guardiola hasn't got exactly what he wanted this summer. I think he's made it clear he wants another midfielder to give Fernandinho a break. Who that other midfielder will be, who knows? We might find out tomorrow on deadline day. But you look across their team and there's no real weakness, and with the addition of Riyad Mahrez, it also gives people like Raheem Sterling and Leroy Sané the chance to maybe have a weekend off. which makes them even that more dangerous when they do come back. So I can't see anyone beating them. They look very good in the Community Shield. I thought Phil Foden did very well in that game as well, which is another option for them, just to add to their countless midfield options. Yeah, exactly. So I can't really see anyone stopping them this season.
Dan, same for you? Or you?
Yeah, I mean, do you want me to make the case for Liverpool?
No, only if you believe in it.
I mean, I think, City look like the most formidable side, clearly and comfortably. 100 points last season. I don't think they'll repeat that. 32 wins, which I think is also a pretty remarkable number as well. Mahrez seems like a very astute signing, the kind of signing that you make when you're going to go and win the league again. A guy who they didn't really need, but will probably prove useful throughout the season. There's an argument to be made that, the weakness is perhaps, Adam touched on it, very reliant on Fernandinho. I think he's 33, so he's kind of getting on a bit. Phil Foden might be the guy who steps in from time to time to help out. He's looked very, very good in pre-season. He looks very good, I thought, even when he played last season at times. He's about half the age of Fernandinho, but apparently the real deal from the people who watch him closely. If I were to make a sort of counter-argument, you might say that Liverpool have strengthened extremely well. Some really big signings. They've really gone out and bought, I think, the players they need. And that's something that, a lot of teams, much to the frustration of their fans, don't do. But, I think City look absolutely formidable. And also, they've got the best coach by some distance. And also, they've got a really young team still. All the players that they rely on, so many of them are still under 25. Sane, Sterling, Stones, Jesus. These are young players, so they should be fit and they should be raring to go again.
But the one question I would ask, I agree with you. I'm not going to be backing them at 1.7, but I do think that they're justifiable favourites. But my one concern with them would be that having won the league last year, knowing that Pep Guardiola probably isn't going to be building an empire there for that long, he's probably going to come to the end of a cycle in the next couple of years. Is there a chance that the Champions League takes priority and therefore the players like Mahrez, players like Bernardo, who maybe didn't get as much game time in the Premier League last season, will be used more there to rest players for the Champions League campaign?
Potentially, but I don't think if you're playing Mahrez and Bernardo Silva, you're going to be weakened at all. I thought the weekend Bernardo Silva was absolutely outstanding, playing in a more central role, which, to be honest, I think he should be playing more regularly, and I'm sure he probably will be playing regularly when David Silva moves on or retires at whatever point. But I can't see the Champions League. I think City's squad is good enough that they could conceivably win the Premier League playing sort of three players who then don't play in the Champions League the following week anyway. So I don't think the Champions League will be a distraction. I can see them winning the Premier League comfortably and probably improving on where they got Champions League last season.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think, they have the squad depth to go far. I think these players have experienced. Basically all of them have just won the title and, went pretty far in the Champions League last time. The only thing you could say perhaps in Liverpool's favour is, they beat City 3 times last season, although 2 of them in the Champions League. They finished 25 points behind. Can they make up that kind of difference? I think City won't finish on 100 points, as I said, but they're probably not going to make up 18 points on City. City could still finish in the low 90s very comfortably. One stat that does go against them: no one's retained the title since 2009, when United won it 3 times in a row. But I think City will do it.
It's a strange one with Liverpool, because you wouldn't be afraid to back them to beat Manchester City in a one-off game.
Yeah.
And Liverpool obviously proved that 3 times last year. But would you back Liverpool to outscore them and claim more points over the 38-game season? Perhaps not, even though they have made really good signings this summer.
There might be good value in the price, though. I think the price is quite good for Liverpool, especially because, as I said, they've got exactly what they needed. They brought in Alisson, who looks fantastic, Naby Keita. You've got as well Fabinho, kind of exactly the kind of players that Klopp's needed for that system. And I think Shaqiri's not a bad signing as well.
It seems like we all agree that Liverpool are the main challengers, I think, and the market seems to agree as well. You can see on Smarkets' site they have a graph that show how the price has changed over time, and Liverpool and United very close behind City for a long time, and that has obviously peeled off, and Liverpool now the clear second favourites. I would agree with you in what you're saying, that you'd probably back them in a one-off game, but often Liverpool dropped points last season against teams that sat back and defended, and surely players like Naby Keita especially are being brought in to break through that line and give them a bit more dynamism and a bit more of a direct threat against teams that sit deep. So for that reason, could we see them? It's a big old gap to make up, but Liverpool were very decent in the second half of last season. Maybe I'm just trying to make an argument here, so we're not all just agreeing about City.
Well, you could argue that, they might have won the Champions League if it wasn't for Karius's errors, and they've gone and bought one of the best keepers in the world. They've also bought 2 midfielders who will give them the kind of platform they need to let the front guys go and do their business, and they certainly did that last season, of course. The forward line was absolutely amazing. I think they were top scorers in the Champions League. probably not top scorers in the Premier League, can't remember off the top of my head, but they've got a formidable side, and it's actually really, really interesting to see what Klopp's put together there. I think he's kind of gone and bought exactly the players they need, and he's talking in a very bullish way. But whether it's enough to topple City, I mean, in a way it's a bit unlucky for Liverpool because they're just up against probably the best Premier League side ever.
I'm really excited to watch Liverpool this year. I mean, the players they brought in, like Naby Keita, Fabinho, Alisson, were exactly what they needed. And I think Naby Keita's their game-changing player a bit in that midfield because he can literally do pretty much everything. I mean, he wins the ball back, and it's not like he is literally a destroyer. He will win the ball back and then go past three players and then tee up a goal. So he's a great signing for them. I think it's credit to Klopp as well, because I think in the past he's been a bit stubborn in sticking with players who perhaps haven't been as good as Liverpool needed, but he had faith in, like Karius. But he's realised that, to really challenge City, he has to put that personal feeling probably to the side and really go out and buy who they need, and he's done that. And it would be great to watch them. I just don't think they have just enough yet to overcome City.
I mean, I was about to say, if that 7 or 10 on City does seem a bit skinny to you, but you do agree that City and Liverpool are the challengers. 7 or 2 is the price, the best price out there on a Manchester City Liverpool 1-2, which looks fair value.
Yeah, it looks pretty good, and I think it was 5.2. You said Liverpool on markets. I still think there is some value in that, but if you ask me who I think is going to win the title, I do think it's City.
The interesting one with an exchange, for those of you who don't know, you can obviously get out of your bet when the price goes shorter. So maybe it could be one to trade. If it is going to be those two at the top, you'd think Liverpool will go shorter than 5.2 as the season wears on. Time for us to move on now onto the top 4 market. I think, as I've mentioned, we all agree who the top 2 are going to be, but that leaves only 2 spots for Manchester United, Chelsea, Tottenham and Arsenal to go out. United are best price 4-7, Chelsea 4-5, Tottenham 5-6 and Arsenal 11-5. So it's looking like, well, in terms of the odds, it's the same top 4 as last time round. Dan, do you think that's fair? I'm not going to expose both for what teams you both support, but I'll let the listeners and watchers decide.
Well, I'm probably going to do that. I mean, I think Chelsea are quite interesting. The man sitting to my right, by pure coincidence, happens to be a big Chelsea expert, but I won't tell you why. But Chelsea are really interesting because they look like the hardest team to read. So obviously there's been kind of this slightly farcical situation at the start of the season where Conte was taking training, but he wasn't going to stick around. There's a question of whether it will take time for Sarabia to work out. Breaking news today is that they're basically going to sign Kepa Arrizabalaga, the Athletic goalkeeper.
Superb pronunciation.
Thank you very much. I think Hazard's going to stay, right? So that's probably a big bonus for them. Where he'll play, I don't know. They have the question of up front. Will it be Morata, Giroud? Maybe you play Hazard as a false 9. There are so many questions. I think Jorginho's probably the right signing for them. Still got Kante, who's obviously, any team that has Kante, right, has a pretty solid midfield. But I just think there are so many variables with Chelsea, and they're the kind of hardest to really know where they'll go. I am an Arsenal fan. Obviously, we've had a summer of turmoil and change, really. Quite a lot going on. I think we've made some quite sensible. Arsenal made some quite sensible signings. Torreira is probably the kind of player that Arsenal needed. They've made some fairly sort of astute additions at the back for not much money, but whether they've really made the kind of signings that they need to go into the top 4, and whether the club will react properly to the change remains to be seen. But they're certainly putting out a lot of content on the various Arsenal media platforms, showing just kind of what a great time all the players are having, doing all the hard work that Emery's asking them to do, and that could go a long way. I think they're probably a decent shout for the top 4, but perhaps I'm a bit biased. As
an Arsenal fan, are you happy with Emery coming in? Are you happy with how pre-season's gone? Do you feel like you're in a better position to go and challenge that top 4 now than you were a year ago?
I think so. I think the signings have been quite good. Obviously, Bernd Lehner has come in from Leverkusen. I used to commentate the Bundesliga a few years ago, and he was kind of coming through when I was doing that as a young player, and he looked fantastic. It seems like he hasn't really developed quite as you'd have hoped. So the question there is, will he be number 1 or Cech? Looks like Ospina will probably leave. I'm not really convinced that Lehner is going to necessarily be a huge improvement on Cech or Ospina. That could make a big difference if he is. And then the defence, I think Arsenal do look a little bit short at centre-back, actually. So Kratos Papastathopoulos has come in. He's kind of at an age where he's going to convey a lot of experience to the players around him, but him and Mustafi probably isn't exactly the kind of centre-back pairing that we're looking for. But I think up front, there's a lot to be said. We'll talk about the top goal scorer market, but I'm a big fan of Aubameyang. I think there's a lot to be said about Arsenal's front line. And then there's this slightly weird situation as well with the CEO, even Gazidis. There's been sort of all these transfer rumours about him going to AC Milan. Will that disrupt things? Is it disrupting things at the moment? Who knows? And then obviously as well, people might have seen, Stan Kroenke, KSE, basically Kroenke Sports Enterprises, is going to make a full takeover of the club, it looks like, which, who knows what that will bring. It could be quite a disruptive situation. But the players on the pitch and on the training pitch look to be getting on really well. The tactics have been tweaked. You could see it in the pre-season games. They're pressing in a way that they weren't before. They're really kind of clustering around when they lose the ball, like counter-pressing, clustering around the opposition, and that was kind of what people thought Arsenal needed, and it does look like it's there. So I do feel confident about a top four finish, but fifth wouldn't surprise me either. But maybe good value in the top four for Arsenal.
Well, both Arsenal and Chelsea seeming a lot of uncertainty around Chelsea. If you do want to back Chelsea for the top four, market is price currently 1.85 to back, and money queuing at 1.9 is bigger than the industry starting price. So, the industry price at the moment. So you should look at that if you're going to back them. It's not like, there's a lot of uncertainty with Chelsea and Arsenal, Adam, but it's not like there's a lot of certainty at Manchester United or Spurs either.
No, I think Manchester United is in contrary to you, probably the hardest one to read, just because Jose Mourinho seems intent on annoying and irritating his players again. He's at that point where he's in his third season, and obviously we know the wheels tend to come off in that third season. Whether or not it will this year remains to be seen. But
the points were made. He normally wins in his first couple.
Yeah,
of
exactly.
Seasons,
and it's a strange tact he's taken this summer, where he has pretty much gone at anyone who's spoken to him. I think he's had a right go at the younger players on the pre-season tour, saying they're not good enough, which was hardly what you want to hear when you're trying to break through at Manchester United. He's obviously criticised Ed Woodward quite a lot for not getting the players he wanted, and whilst there obviously is something in that, because Manchester United make a hell of a lot of money and they have only signed Fred and Diego Dalot and Lee Grant.
Don't forget Grant.
So there is perhaps an element of he's got a point to what he is complaining about, but the general negativity he's curating in that dressing room can't be good for the team, and for people like Anthony Martial. When you go home to have just your birth of your second child, and your manager basically calls you out for doing so, it's a bit of a ludicrous situation to be involved in. So Manchester United is impossible to read. Spurs I would probably back to get in the top four ahead of Arsenal and Chelsea, largely because I think they're very settled. They've got a manager who knows exactly what he wants from his players. They've got players who know exactly what the manager wants from them. The fact that they've got quite a few returning late from the World Cup is probably an issue. But then the same tact on that is they've got a group of players who can return and know exactly what tactical plan the manager has for them already. So I think Spurs will probably get into the top four, and then it's probably one of three, I would say, between Chelsea, Arsenal and United for fourth.
Who are you hanging your hat on for the fourth one? I need an answer.
I will go with Manchester United.
Interesting.
I think United are more likely to drop out of the top four than Spurs. Personally, I think they're a little bit of a basket case in relative terms, obviously, for such a big club. As Adam said, it's sort of slightly chaotic, kind of uninspiring signings. Fridge, I believe, is a pretty good one, but beyond that, it's Dalot, isn't it, who they've signed as well. Might not really be what they need to kind of kick on. Maybe Alexis Sanchez finally getting a rest over the summer. I think it's the first time in about 5 years. Could really make the difference for them, but I think that they could struggle. Mourinho just looks tetchy, looks like he's in a bad place, and that probably means that United will be. Spurs, I think, are really interesting just because, as Adam said, a lot of their players are going to come back late. I think they've made no signings. They're only a top flight side who've made 0 signings. Looks like Alderweireld as well might go to United, which would be a huge blow for them. Although Spurs have made 2 big signings this summer, of course, Pochettino signing on long term and Harry Kane as well. But Kane, famously never scores in August, right? And they're probably going to be a bit tired. I think their new stadium won't be ready. So it could be some value in perhaps waiting to see Spurs price drift and then get in on them, because they looks like they might start a bit slow.
So who would be your 4?
Liverpool, City, Tottenham, and I'm going to be bullish and say Arsenal.
There you have it. If you do want to back United not to finish on the top 4, that market is on our site, and 9-4 is available. 7-4 elsewhere, but 9-4 is the biggest price. And if you share the positivity with Dan about Arsenal, 11-5 best price they are. And as I said, Chelsea is better on its markets than anywhere else at 1.85 currently to back. So we've covered the top 6. This is where half the people turn off, but we're going to crack on through the league. And
top
next
goal
up,
scorer to come. That's an
top goal scorer is always an exciting one. So don't turn off yet, because there is going to be talk about your Harry Kanes, your Ashley Barneses. But we're now going to look at that clutch of teams who are vying to get into the Big Six. Firstly, I mean, I'll go through the without Big Six market first, and then we'll talk about the top 10 market, and then even if we can expect any of these teams to actually gatecrash the party. Everton are 2-1, Leicester 5-1, Wolves 6-1, West Ham 7-1, Southampton 10-1. It's a pretty open market, this, for teams who to finish 7th, basically, or just to finish the highest of the teams outside the top 6. Adam, who do you think is best set to, or is the closest in terms of quality to being able to do that?
I would probably go for Everton, which is hardly that shocking, but I think they were really poor last year, and with a group of players that they should have done a lot better with. And Marco Silva is, for all his potential faults in terms of loyalty and things like that, he's a good coach, and they do have a good first 11. I think the signing of Richarlison is really interesting. It's a hell of a lot of money they paid for him, but I think at the start of last season, when he was happy and playing under Silva, he was very, very good, even though he did miss a hell of a lot of chances then. So I think he's an interesting signing. I think the fact Ademola Lookman's back, and Silva said he's going to incorporate him is interesting.
Back at the moment, I still have a feeling Leipzig might still be trying to force something through, but we'll see.
But I think they've brought in players like Lucas Digne, who is an interesting player and is probably the heir to Baines at left back. So I think they've got a very good starting 11. Be interesting how Cenk Tosun does this season, because I'm assuming he'll be the main man, and if everything clicks, I think they'll be comfortably 7th this year.
And obviously, judging by the World Cup, which we should never do, Yerry Mina should be in for at least 15 goals from corners if he does make the move. So that'll be exciting to see. Dan, do you agree? Everton, the clear favourites there?
Yeah, they're an interesting one, Everton, because I do think they've put a quite good side together and made some quite good signings over the last sort of year or so. I think Walcott's there, of course. Cenk Tosun, as Adam said. Luca Dean's a very good player with great pedigree, Barcelona and Paris Saint-Germain. But I find the Richarlison signing quite weird. I mean, it was a big fee. He's looked very dangerous at times, undeniably, as Adam said. There were times where I remember against Arsenal. He was just such a handful. But one of those players who I think is quite inconsistent. If his head's not right, he's perhaps not kind of guy you want to rely on, and it's a huge amount of money. I mean, this is obviously the opinion of somebody didn't watch Watford every week, and so I don't necessarily know if he's putting in the hard graft in those other games where I didn't see him. But I think that's a pretty hefty fee. One slightly interesting point is that the former partner of Alisher Usmanov, the man who former business partner or one of his business partners. Basically, Alisher Usmanov is selling his shares in Arsenal.
Okay.
He's getting rid of them, and there's been a lot of talk about him taking over fully at Everton to join his former business partner there.
Yeah.
Now that has been, I think the BBC reporting that wouldn't happen, but if it did, I mean, this guy has billions and billions to spend. Supposedly was richer than Roman Abramovich. So Everton could be starting to build into something of a financial powerhouse. That's probably not one for this season, but perhaps a situation to watch. But I think Everton obviously do look like the top side there. But I'd say Fulham are a decent shout in terms of value. I mean, they've made some amazing signings. Obviously, a side who's just come up, but they've really brought in, I think, some quality players and bought extremely well. And of course, just got big Callum Chambers on.
Well, I was about to say they were cut from 40s into 33s in this market, obviously on the back of the Chambers signing, I think.
That's right.
It must be. But no, I mean, I agree with you. As someone who loves his EFL football. You talk. People seem to be pretty perplexed at the price of Wolves to do well. They're 6-1 here, but I think this Wolves team has a ceiling that maybe might exceed people's expectations. It could not work, but I think that 6-1, if it does click and does go to plan, could look really, really big indeed. Because I do think that, given the people who are in charge of the club, given the quality of the manager in Nuno, who I think is arguably one of the Premier League's elite in terms of what he's done already in the game, in a kind of a different respect in terms of performing above expectation, and the transfers they've made this summer and the quality they've already got, I am going to say that I think Wolves at 6-1 is very interesting indeed. And also, we're now going to look at the top half market and that 11 to 10. on Wolves to finish in the top half is one that I think is massive, basically. I mean, I know they might be playing for 3 spots, but realistically, that's the minimum aim for the owners and the manager this season. So
I think I agree with you on Wolves for the top half. I think they're a great shot for that. They've made some really good signings too. I think they got Rui Patricio, didn't they?
Yeah,
as well?
Rui Patricio, Dramatinho.
Dramatinho's a fantastic player.
Adama Traore, who I think in a good team will do bits.
I think they do have a really, really solid chance of reaching the top half. Them and Fulham, I think, as well. And also, people will underestimate promoted sides just because they have come up. I wouldn't say that Wolves and Fulham look like Championship teams now at all.
No.
I'd agree. I think Fulham have a group of excellent players and they've signed really, really well. I think they've got a manager who will coach a top team one day in Slaviša Jokanovic. I used to cover Watford and I got to know him quite well, and whilst he may sound quite dour in interviews, he's actually a very, very bright coach and has proven it with Fulham. He proved it with Watford as well during his time there, getting them up.
How was he not able to manage that team in the Premier League? I'll never know. I mean, that run they went on to get promoted was extraordinary.
Yeah,
and then
it depends who you speak to about what went wrong with those contract negotiations.
Okay, we'll speak after off camera, I think.
But I think, their team's great. They've got, obviously, keeping Tom Kearney's big. Ryan Sessegnon will be fascinating to see how he gets on in the Premier League. And then they've got Alexander Mitrovic, who will, I'm sure, be waiting to prove a point to Rafa Benitez after he left Newcastle. And
Seri as well. I mean, Seri's a guy who was linked to Arsenal, Barcelona about a year ago.
Arsenal fans were desperate for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm sure he was linked with Barcelona as well.
12 months ago, yeah. I think he thought it was pretty much done
really,
on his part.
You never know if it's paper talk, but it sounds like there was a lot going on there. I mean, I think he's a fantastic signing. Andre Schürrle, I mean, he's a guy who scored, World Cup semi-final, but, won the World Cup with Germany only 4 years ago, and I always thought looked a really, really dangerous player. He's been playing in the Bundesliga and he's going to come back here, and I think he's an excellent signing for a team like Fulham. It's a 2-year loan, I believe.
And he's an age as well. I think he's in his kind of mid to late 20s.
Yeah.
So he's by no means, he shouldn't be over the hill anyway. You wouldn't have thought. 27 years old.
And it's not like they're banking on one key signing as well. They've gone and brought a kind of a breadth of players who will cover a lot of positions, and I think they look like a really solid shout for the top half.
And just on Wolves as well, I think obviously we touched on them. I'm really interested to see how Ruben Neves does in the Premier League. I think he was, not to disrespect Wolves fans, brought in to get them up and then to shine in the Premier League and then potentially go for a very, very big fee. And just on Adama Traore, it's taken a while, but I'm going to get some stats in now.
Yes.
Last season, a Championship, 9.66 take-ons per 90, which the next highest was 4.56.
Wow.
So give him the ball and let him run.
I'd like to see a match bet next season of take-ons per 90 between Hazard and Traore. I'd like to see how that
be very close, I'd imagine.
The take-on kings against each other. I agree on Fulham. I think for people watching this who are a bit surprised by our lofty ambitions for them, I think it's worth pointing out that both owners of Fulham and Wolves have far, far higher ambitions in the long term than being just an also-ran Premier League team. They have ambitions to get into Europe. Let's not forget that obviously that Fulham were Europa League finalists just a few years ago. It makes me sound a bit old saying a few years ago, but indeed they've got that pedigree, and 6-1 for them. Anyone who hasn't seen the Jokanovic team play football, it really is good to watch, and they've got some cracking players in there as well. So I do agree with you. Before we move on lower down the table, I'm going to run through the odds for a top half finish, just in case there's anyone there who you think could be a bit vulnerable amongst the shorter price lot. We've got Everton at 4-11, Leicester even money, Wolves 11-10. West Ham 5-4, Southampton 15-8, Palace 9-4, Newcastle 9-4, Bournemouth 5-2, Burnley 7-2, Fulham 6-1, and then the also around at the bottom. Anyone there who you think is a bit short in the market, maybe? A bit of a lay on markets.
I think you might be some value in Crystal Palace. I think Roy Hodgson did a very good job last season. Obviously, they gave teams, I think it was 7 games head start before they started and ended up still finishing 11th. They've as of now still got Wilfried Zaha, which is huge, and if they can sort out Christian Benteke, who last season scored 3 goals, yet his expected goals was 10.5, if they can sort out his confidence, then they've got a very good striker again. But I think they've signed well, and I think they'll be a team who can push on this season.
I love a bit of expected goals. I really do.
So do I.
I would say maybe Newcastle could be worth a lay there. It pains me to say it because it's a club I really like. But I just think that actually there's a danger there that if Rafa Benitez if he were to leave, or if if things kind of don't go right, that they'd be in real trouble. I think he's probably crucial to that club. Might be in the last year of his contract, if I remember right. So that there could be some value in that, perhaps, to lay on Newcastle for the top 10. But as I said, a team I like, and I wouldn't like to see it.
This is going to probably get me a bit of grief on social media, but one team I want to get against is West Ham at about the 5-4 mark. They're odds on in places to finish in the top half. This is still West Ham. I know they've invested in the squad. I know they've invested in the players. I'm not convinced that Pellegrini's necessarily a fantastic appointment for a club in their situation. I just think that the odds of around about the even money mark give them a 50% chance of finishing in the top 10. They're not going to finish in the top 6. There aren't many places up for grabs. We've already said we like Everton. We've said we like Crystal Palace. We've said that we like Fulham. Yeah, that's a massive vein in my book.
I'd probably agree with you. I think West Ham have made some good signings. I think Felipe Anderson, is a good signing. I think he completed 6 successful take-ons per 90 in Serie A last season, which was the most of any player, so he'll be exciting to watch. But then they've still gone their West Ham way in signing Jack Wilshere and Yarmolenko, 2 players who haven't probably been at their peak for a good couple of years. So I wouldn't be surprised if West Ham... I don't think they'll get relegated or even struggle that much, but I don't think they'll finish in the top half.
And you've also got the issue of basically not really having a home ground, which can't be particular, because their form at the London Stadium is still fairly poor. It doesn't feel, I don't know if you've been there, but it doesn't feel like you're at a home game, even in the West Ham fans.
Yeah, I went there for a friendly, but before the start of last season. But I think maybe it's something that's changing over time. It does take a while. Obviously, I watched Arsenal move into the Emirates, and took a little bit of time, I suppose. And Tottenham will have a similar issue as well, of course, this season. But I think you make a good point. Like Yarmolenko is a guy I used to like a few years ago, and perhaps hasn't quite sort of maintained the level you'd be looking for. Jack Wilshere, obviously a guy with huge talent, but I'd say, to be generous, it's a very open question as to whether he can really provide what a Premier League club needs kind of week in, week out. I do think they made some quite good signings, but yeah, when you put it like that, George, not a bad shout, to be honest.
Good stuff. I'm glad you guys agree with me. Normally, it's everyone telling me I'm wrong on this program.
You'll be told that on Twitter.
Yeah. I can't wait for it. If people are watching. Relegation now to the bottom end of the table, and to run through the market. Cardiff are about the same price as Manchester City are to win the league, 7 and 10. Huddersfield 5-4. Watford are 9-4 alongside, and Brighton 3-1. Fulham 7-2. Burnley, massive variance in their price. One firm have them at 2-1, but they are best price 4-1. Bournemouth are 5-1. The 2 pretty short favourites to go down. It doesn't look like the most open market, but maybe some juice there at bigger prices. Who are you looking at, Adam, to get relegated?
I would say Cardiff and Huddersfield.
Yeah.
As much as I'd like Huddersfield to stay up, because I really like what David Wagner's done, and I quite like him as a coach, I do think he's obviously working in a much more restricted budget than most clubs in the Premier League. And Neil Warnock has proved himself to be excellent in the Championship, but then doesn't have the tactical nous, shall we say, in the Premier League. And I think Cardiff, they've spent not much money, but they've brought in players from the Championship, and I'd be wary of them more preparing to go back down and then having a squad capable of getting back up, kind of like West Brom used to do. And there is some merit in that, but I can't see them staying up, unfortunately. And Huddersfield may join them. And then it's quite open, that third spot, I would say. So, yeah, I would go with the odds.
Yeah, it looks like Cardiff and Huddersfield and then pick another, really, doesn't it? I wouldn't say it's a sure thing, and if I did, it probably wouldn't happen, right? Because that's how these things work. But it's football. But Cardiff do look like a side who are going to head back down again. There's the Neil Warnock factor, as Adam said. Doesn't really look like they've strengthened enough. They do just look like a Championship side, and they weren't the third best team in the Championship, were they? I think probably. So, they were
the second in terms of the league itself. So.
Sorry, yeah, but they weren't.
Yeah.
I think of those 3 that come up, they weren't even necessarily the second best side. They just kind of overperformed. Neil Warnock kind of really got the best out in the Championship, and then there is the kind of the Neil Warnock law, like he'll have the inverse of that in the Premier League, and they already don't look like a side that's probably good enough. Our chef at Markets, Alex, will be furious about this, but I do think Cardiff look pretty set to go back down again. Huddersfield, I think, are interesting. It was a remarkable job that Wagner did to keep them up. I think they probably got through on adrenaline a lot of the time, and there might be a kind of collective second season syndrome for them where that adrenaline's kind of gone. And I think those 2 are heading down. And then as Adam said, like pick another one. Perhaps Watford. I think they're the favourites, aren't they? After those two,
Yeah.
with pretty much everybody. Maybe a bit of a shout for Southampton. You know, Mark Hughes looks kind of
7-1 now.
yeah, and I think it could have a kind of tricky situation at Southampton. Obviously, they nearly went down last time around. They lost Tadic, I believe.
Yeah, some Ajax.
Have brought some players in, but I think there's possible value in Southampton.
Interesting. I mean, I looking at the teams that came up last season, obviously all three of them stayed up. So I just think that maybe Cardiff, although in terms of sheer squad quality, they look miles behind everyone else, but they were so functional that maybe that could suit them. They don't have to change their style of play at all, because all they did last season was sit back and try and score in the break. So I do wonder if maybe this could be the season that Warner gets it right. I mean, I've backed Huddersfield to go down as much as I agree about Wagner. I think that it was their early season form when they were riding the crest of a wave that kept them up last season. They faced Chelsea on day one. If they suffer to a big defeat there, it could be a long old season for them, although fingers crossed. Well, not fingers crossed, I backed them to go down. But yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a really open market for that, for the reason that I'm happy to leave Cardiff. And I just wonder if Burnley at 4-1, it doesn't seem the biggest price given the fact they finished 7th last year. But, statistically, Adam, they probably didn't deserve to finish there.
No, you can see the logic in backing Burnley, because they're obviously going to have to dovetail the Europa League as well. Last season they defied pretty much any sort of statistical model you could find, which is a testament to Sean Dyche, because it's not an uncommon thing that Burnley do this. And I know the people who are really, really into stats don't really understand Burnley. I'm intrigued by the signing of Joe Hart, because I think Sean Dyche may have created a problem for himself there when he didn't need to. I think Tom Heaton's not going to be out for too long, and then Nick Pope will be back at some point as well. And then you've got two very good goalkeepers, and Joe Hart, who's trying to rediscover his best form. So that'll be an interesting situation. I quite like the sign of Ben Gibson. I think he's perfect centre-back for Sean Dyche, his team. It'd just be interesting where the goals are going to come from, and whether or not Ashley Barnes can keep up his incredible record from last season.
Obviously, Matej Vidra has come in, and rumours of a £80 million bid for Jay Rodriguez, back to his old club. Mm-hmm. And it seems like a lot of money to be throwing around for a club like Burnley. And obviously Ben Gibson was I think 50 million quid as well.
I quite like Jay Rodriguez, and it'd be nice for him to go back to Burnley. Vidra is a player I know from my days covering Watford. He is very good when he's hot, and not very good when he's not. He was good at Derby last season, and hopefully for Burnley's sake he'll continue that in the Premier League. I'm going to stick up for Watford because of my firstly local links, but because I sort of know the club quite well. They kind of do this every year, where they look like they've not really strengthened that well. You've got the classic Serie A defender who you've probably never heard of, who's been brought in, but I think rumours are there that they're trying to sign Paco Alcacer on loan from Barcelona, which would be quite an interesting one, because last season they did struggle for goals. Yeah. I think Deeney only had 5 and Andre Gray only had 5. But they've signed Deulofeu, they've kept Decore, and Javier Gracia's had a whole pre-season. Whether or not that will make a difference, and whether or not he'll be sacked in January, and Watford will pick up their usual sort of 10, 15 points after that and be fine, it remains to be seen. But it is so hard picking that third one. I could see logic in Southampton. They've signed El Unici, who should provide some goals, because that was their big issue last season. But I'm not entirely sure Mark Hughes is the right fit for Southampton. He was obviously perfect to keep them up, but whether or not he's a long-term investment there is intriguing.
It's interesting that you both seem to be leaning on Southampton for that bit of value, and you've also agreed that Cardiff and Huddersfield are going to go down. So instead of backing just Southampton to get relegated at 7-1, you can back the three of them to go down at 50s. So you're getting a much bigger price there. If you are happy to think the two favourites are going to go down, you can back Southampton to follow them in at a much bigger price. Anyone else you guys are fearing for before we go into the top goal scorer market? I
was thinking Brighton, but Chris Hughton's made some interesting signings. There's Ali Reza Janbashkash, I think is how you pronounce it, who did very well last season in the Eredivisie.
Top scorer, wasn't he?
Definitely, and he is an interesting player, and it'd be interesting to see how he fits in. A lot of his goals were quite spectacular last season from long range, so it'd be interesting to see if he has that space to do the same. But it's an interesting one, Brian, whether or not they can just get all these new signings, and they're very varied and from different places to gel. And if they do, they'll probably be fine. But if they don't, then they may struggle.
Brighton are 3-1 to get relegated. 3-1. It does seem a bit big there, as short elsewhere as 2-1. So some people do agree with you, but some people take their neck out at threes. Dan, anything to add, or should we go into the first goal scorers?
I just think in terms of the Watford thing, they traditionally struggle right at the start of the season and then kind of figure it out later. So perhaps some value in kind of waiting until they're at their best price and then backing them to stay up or laying them for relegation.
Always seem to have a topsy-turvy season, Watford. So we'll see how they get on with Javi Gracia at the helm. Top goal scorer now. Everyone's favourite one at the beginning of the season. I think we've all had these crazy accas going across all the leagues, winning us a million quid. It's weird how they never seem to come in. But Harry Kane is the 130 favourite. Mohamed Salah 28-5. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, a bit of money from him in the last couple of days, 7-1. He is now Sergio Aguero 8-1. Romelu Lukaku 10-1. Gabriel Jesus 14s. Lacazette 25s, Firmino 33s, Morata 33s. We could go on. Alexis Sanchez 40-1. Dan, a murmur of appreciation.
No, I had a thought about the Alexis thing, but I'd like to talk about Aubameyang. I just think, obviously I'm a little bit biased perhaps, but he came into the league last season. He scored 10 goals in 13 Premier League appearances, which is a pretty good rate. But what's really interesting about him is his shot conversion. So in his lifetime in the Premier League, he scored 10 goals from 31 shots. 32% conversion rate. If you compare that to Kane last season, Kane was 16. So, double. So he would only need to really, even if he just stretched that across the rest of the season at a normal rate, he'd score 30 in the league if he maintained that. It's not likely he will, but, you'd think that if he can up his shot volume, Aubameyang's a really good shout for top scorer in the Premier League. Aguero was 22%, Salah was 22%. So, at 32, Aubameyang looks pretty astonishing in terms of his clinical nature in front of goal. I think there's very good value in Aubameyang. He may share some of the goals with Lacazette, so there's an argument that Lacazette represents very good value. I think he's sort of 25-26 on Smarkets. There's an open question, of course, about who will play up front in the Arsenal system. It looks like Lacazette's going to probably start at number 9 with Aubameyang coming from the left. Maybe in some games Aubameyang will be number 9 depending on the opposition, and Lacazette will step out of the team. But I think, even from the left side, he pretty much played from the left wing, or kind of nominally on paper the left wing for most of those games last season, Aubameyang, and still managed to bang in 10 goals in 13. So, I think he's a really good shout.
Yeah, so Aubameyang 7.4 on Smarkets, which is bigger than the general market price of 6-1 across. So make sure you do check the prices first.
Also with Kane, so I was just going to say, this whole August thing, right? He looks tired at the World Cup. He seems like a guy who really pushes himself all the time. Always wants to be playing even when he's tired.
Just had a baby.
Just had a baby, which is tiring for anyone.
Yep.
And remarkable for a man, of course.
Yeah.
And he's coming back, a little bit late from the World Cup. And
just to clarify, Harry Kane has not given birth.
He hasn't given birth.
It is his wife. So congratulations to the pair.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's coming back, of course. Probably tired, probably a little bit out of shape, needing that break. Never scores in August, apparently. So there might be some value there, and kind of again, waiting for his price to kind of to stretch a bit, and then laying on later, perhaps.
Harry Kane, 4.3, so that matches the best price out there. But it does mean if you're back on Smarkets, and it does come in or drift out, you can get in or out of your bet as it progresses. Adam, who are you looking at here?
I would agree with Aubameyang. I think he's excellent value, and just to continue on the theme of him being excellent, his XG after coming to the Premier League last season was 6.37, and he obviously scored 10 goals, so he's outperformed that quite substantially. If he was to do that over the course of the season, you'd expect him to be up there.
It's with a low shot volume as well, so if you can up that, you think he's got a really good chance.
Mohamed Salah is interesting because he scored 1.58 goals for every 1 XG, but in his previous season at Roma it was only 1 goal for every 1.09 XG, so he massively outperformed last season, and whether or not he'll be able to keep that up will be interesting. Just on Alvaro Morata, because he's had a lot of stick from a lot of places, including from Chelsea fans. He hasn't looked great in pre-season, but last year he scored 11 goals from 13 XG, but the season before at Real Madrid he scored 15 from 8 XG. So it suggests that if he can rediscover his confidence, he will have a chance of actually contributing to Chelsea this season rather than sort of failing to perform as he did at the back end of last season. Personally, I would go Sergio Aguero. which isn't outlandish.
Well, no, I think, a couple of things. Firstly, just on Morata, if you are going to back Morata to win the top goal scorer, you have to do it with markets, because markets are 44 when the best industry price is 33-1. So this is one of those real occasions where betting on the exchange can really, really help you out.
There are many of those occasions.
Many of them, and this is one of them. And then on Lukaku, sorry, not Lukaku, we haven't mentioned him yet, on Aguero. It's absolutely staggering that you think about the short price that City are to win the league. You think about the fact that he's already shown in the Community Shield that he is fit and ready and raring to go. He didn't have a very taxing summer whatsoever. And he's 8-1.
Yeah, I kind of almost forgot about Aguero as well, and then was thinking about it and was like, oh yeah, of course, he's got 21 goals from 94 shots, so 22% conversion rate. I think the question with him is, and obviously he's been there and done it before, he's just got 200 goals for City, hasn't he? I think there's a very strong argument that he's the greatest striker in terms of goal scoring the Premier League has ever seen. But nonetheless, it's the fitness thing, isn't it? Will he be fit throughout the season? Will he be able to play every game? I think if he does, he probably is top scorer. But in terms of what the prices are looking like in the market, maybe some of those prices are swayed by the fact that you've got these two big headline strikers, Kane and Salah, who both got 30 and 32 goals. And people look at the 21 return from Aguero and just think, that's a long way off. And can he actually bridge that gap next season, assuming that Kane and Aguero
it's also because, obviously Pep Guardiola does have Gabriel Jesus as well. And
does it not feel like Jesus' stock has fallen a bit in the last kind of 6 to 8 months? A very, very poor World Cup, and he didn't really stake his claim that much last season. Yeah, absolutely. But I think this time last year we were looking at thinking last season was going to be the season where he overtook Aguero, and now if anything they're further apart.
He had a knee injury, didn't he? He had quite a bad injury when he first arrived. But I think, sorry to cut you off, Adam, but I just was going to say that I think people will look at Aguero and think this is a guy who will get rotated. He will be sitting out when there's an opportunity to do so.
I think that is probably why he is not probably odds favourite to do it. But at the same point, if he does play 25, 30 games, you'd back him to score at least 25 goals. Yeah. So for my money, he'd be the person to go with, although I can see a lot of logic in Aubameyang.
4 places and a quarter of the odds for that 8-1. I don't know how long that'll be there, but have a look on the Odds Checker site and you'll see it there. Before we wrap up this preview, Adam, I know that it would be wrong to do it without finishing with a stat. And I don't know what it is, but I've been told that you've got a fantastic stat about Manchester United, a team that, unsurprisingly, we haven't heard much about when talking about top goal scorers.
Yeah, so this is a stat from last season which, astounded a lot of the stats guys, and it's probably a bit concerning if you're a Man United fan that you haven't signed a central defender as yet, although Toby Alderweireld may arrive. But last season, Manchester United's XG against was 44.4, which was the 6th worst in the league, yet they conceded just 28 goals, which is largely a mark of how incredible David De Gea is, that he essentially saved Man United 16 goals.
And do we expect them to do it again with him in goal?
I can't see I can't see it being that sustainable. I'm sure he will continue to pull off the incredible on a nearly weekly basis, but it's just it's too freakish to continue.
He does often kind of keep up a similar kind of delta between the two. But if you compare that to other goalkeepers, the other top goalkeepers are nowhere near. Some of them, in fact, kind of underperform. Yeah. And he outperforms us at the XG so much that he's an extraordinary asset. You think he's been there since 2011? I'd completely forgotten, and I read that the other day, and you just forget how long they've had this amazing goalkeeper.
So there you have it. It is David De Gea who is the saviour at Manchester United, and we'll see if next season he can continue to do so. I think we're very positive about Manchester City, about Liverpool, at time to be concerned if you are a Cardiff or Huddersfield fan, and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang and Sergio Aguero at the value for top goal scorers. Thanks very much to Adam and Dan for coming here. Make sure that you check out Football Whispers and Smarkets for all your football info, if you're betting for Smarkets, for your stats for Football Whispers, and obviously check Odds Checker to make sure you're winning the most for your bets. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to make sure you're getting all of our video previews and all of our tips before anywhere else. But most importantly, enjoy the Premier League campaign starting on Friday.